Which one of these is the mask, right? Like that's the issue. I get it all the time, and I need to like reconvince myself out of like terrible ideas.
One of the funny things about like the conversations that we had, I know on some level, I don't want to say you're playing a character, but you lean into what's good for the conversation, right?
Yeah.
So I guess my question is, you described like political corporatism, but like kind of like, dude, it was like centrist fascism. It was like amazing, where you're like, I think this, and this are conservative and based, and I think this, and this are, progressive and based, and I don't like this, and this about religion. This is cringe, and this is the ideal society. But I think that everybody should agree with me, or else they're stupid, and I'll implement my agenda. So I guess my question is that actually the way that you feel, or is that kind of the character, I guess?
It's
It's not how I feel.
it's complicated, right? So like it's not that complicated. So I think I'm like typically like those political compass tests that they put out
Yeah.
that are extremely inaccurate, but I think will get you like in the general range of where you probably are.
Right.
On those, I tend to be like right in the middle and like five squares down. Right. I think I'm like
Okay.
a centrist social libertarian is what the thing is.
Right.
Um, but I think that I've been in communities where these ideas are being discussed for so long, and I've had those
Back of
debates,
your
and
hand.
yeah, it's I just kind of absorb some of it by osmosis, right? And something that I've done over the years to grow my community is when you have a bunch of people who agree with each other, it gets very stale, right? So I regularly, especially at the start, but still now, would take on just whatever the dominant position in the voice channel was. I would take on the exact opposite position, like the
And fight
furthest
it.
thing away from it. Yeah, because I felt like most people come from very like insular ideological like groups, right? Like the families, most family members are like Democrats or Republicans or whatever. They never really explore anything beyond that. If they're going to college and they're into politics, they're probably getting into like socialism and shit, but they're not even thinking to explore fascism at all. And it's like a very like narrow range of ideas that they're actually engaging with.
Damn,
At
this
least
guy
in my
is
experience.
gross as fuck.
Yeah.
Like if it's gonna be like crazy in one direction, it's always crazy far left. Yeah. So Dooby, I was asking if you're libertarian out of a sense of
Yeah.
pragmatism.
No, I would be a libertarian because I just think it's the right thing to do. Right? I don't think it's okay to force people to do things. Unfortunately, but I think that, and this probably comes from just having the arguments a million times, right? But and taking on
You brought in Danny.
the devil's advocate position so often. You guys okay back there? You ever heard of like irony poisoning?
Yep.
I get that all the fucking time.
Dude,
Like-
I think Dreg is like fucked. Like
What
J-Reg.
is irony poisoning?
Yeah, you explain it.
Yeah, well, you explain. You're much better at explaining that than I am, and I'm about to be murdered.
Okay, so yeah, so for me, what I would say is irony poisoned. You're so used to everybody being sarcastic and you being sarcastic yourself and so jaded that basically what happens is like you're almost like out of feelings.
Yeah.
You just forget where the joke started. You forget like where the line is. Like
Yeah.
how much of this is ironic and what do you like
Yeah.
because you're like putting yourself in a position to like to speak as if you believe these things, you actually start to believe them on some level because you just get so good at it. Right. And
Yeah.
eventually if you do it for long enough, you forget like where the line is basically. It's like which one of these is the mask, right? Like that's the issue. I get it all the time, and I need to like reconvince myself out of like terrible ideas.
Well, and I think that's what happens when you read people for a while. Like when like whenever I read like a socialist or a communist or whatever, and they lay out their ideas well, we can technically just run for the plane. I'm just killing people for fun. So Danny, if you want to run for the plane. But yeah, like so you consider somebody's ideas and you steel man them in your head. So you actually consider them, and when you after a while, like you kind of have to like stop reading for a second just to breathe and then like recenter yourself within your own framework.
Right.
And that can be tough if you're just like constantly engaging with toxic ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like I get that, but not with political ideas. Just when I'm angry at somebody, I'll convince myself partly that it's a joke. So when I go to yell at them, I can partly joke while I'm yelling at them, but also I am actually mad at them.
That's probably a conflict avoidance strategy.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's where we're at as the culture, which I'm actually kind of hopeful about. Is what is it like? Kanye is. We thought that like Trump was blowing out the walls on the Overton window. Kanye is just fucking ripping them all down. So as much as like I don't expect like to see Hebrew Israelites and fucking Richard Spencer and the alt right like having a 10,000 person march where we're actually trying to implement fascism and like everybody else in the country is like, yeah, like maybe let's give it a shot. Like I don't expect that to happen. Um, but I'm kind of hoping what can happen is like a conversational reset where we've been so used to just shutting ideas down and like not arguing with each other's morality and like perspectives on the world. I hope we can at least be like, okay, this was like a really fucked up decade. The internet has taken us all for a spin. Let's like reset conversationally and try to have like adult, sober conversations about what's important in our society and what's good and what's bad. That would be a super important conversation to have. I just don't know if we're mature enough to have it.
Hmm. By the way,
And I'm actually going to be right back. I'm going to grab some water. So I was going to say, Dooby, I'm down for centrist, centrist fascism or whatever. But I think the problem with your centrist fascism that was frustrating for me was you were like viscerally anti-theist, like crazy anti-theist.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so
I'm not actually anti-theist.
In that conversation, you were like, "Fuck
Yeah, it was.
the church, fuck Judaism, fuck Islam, fuck Christianity, fuck Buddhism." It's all about a bunch of hocus pocus
What
nonsense.
fucking conversation have I walked into?
it's centrist fascism. I kind of want to see what centrist fascism is, actually.
Well, I'll describe it because Doobie was basically like, if you took like modern American like liberal and progressive values, not like BLM, but just like tolerance for gay people and trans people and shit, and you instigated that into it, and then if you just like viscerally purged like religion from society, and then I think we might have talked about like a hybrid market. So it would have been like, government nationalizes what it wants
Correct.
to, lets everything be free that it needs to. And then also like I think there might have been a mention of like some like negative behaviors. I don't know if it was like porn, but it was like shit like that like, basically if there's like a negative social consequence, we just ban it. And
Yeah.
if people fuck with the bans, we just fuck them over. Like we don't give a fuck what the
Yeah.
consequences are.
It'd basically be like you'd have like an inquisition, just like Warhammer has, right? So like long term, porn is a bad thing. So we're gonna ban the porn. If people don't like that, then fuck them. We'll put them in a cage for 20 years. Like that's
God.
it's like it's very extreme because it was like the ends justify the means, right? So the end is, all the positive things that come from banning porn, right? So to get there, we're willing to sacrifice a handful of people along the way, right? That resist us.
Yeah, and that it was like super fucking hardcore, and I was like I was like okay with it because I was like, okay, like these things, like if they happened, like I don't think I would revolt against the government or anything. And then he was like, and fuck religion, like we're gonna take that shit, we're gonna destroy all these like Stone Age, Iron Age beliefs. They're so toxic and they're so fucking evil for society. And I was like, like and the reason why I'm is because like I would describe myself as like culturally Christian. And what I mean by that is I think there's like a moral code that you can integrate into yourself through just like osmosis of being exposed to Christianity through your youth. And I think like a lot of those like moral foundations are correct. Like, you know, it's better to tell the truth than to lie even on like a societal level. That's true. You know, honor thy father and thy mother. You know, try not to fuck your neighbor's wife. Don't steal other people's shit. Like all these things that we kind of assume are like moral foundations. When you associate them with like the edicts of God, and you're terrified of the consequences when you break even a small infraction, I think there's like some level of social utility to that.
Well, see that
Whereas
Hold on. Isn't that broadly speaking true of the vast majority of religions, though? Like, and
No.
also like areas that don't have that religious backing, like
not really. Like there's so for instance, like my study of Islam was actually like super interesting. At least if you're just going off of the Quran. Like Quran is incredibly vague about like a whole bunch of like moral edicts, and it's more about like a tribal identity around like a certain set of core beliefs and reinforcing those beliefs. So like you could say that these societies have like they've like kind of copy pasted, or as a general rule most humans follow these laws, but they're not totally true. Other societies have different principal priorities.
okay, but we're talking about like two Abrahamic faiths with, broadly speaking, pretty similar bases. And when we're talking about, say, let's say the differences between Islam and Christianity as like a moral base, like, yeah, you can say you grew up in a Christian society, but you grew up in a Christian society in the modern day that's been pushed through multiple lenses through over like
Sure.
2,000 years. Like if you're just going based on the scriptural stuff, like of Christianity, like yes, you've got things like the Ten Commandments because Christ said, "I'm not here to like remove the old laws." But at the same time, like the principal law is love thy neighbor as thyself. That's the law of Christianity, like beyond the Ten Commandments. So if we're just going by that and just going by the New Testament's incredibly prescriptive about the way things are. I mean, like you can have a conversation, for example, of the fact that like having sex in marriage is sinful. Like all things are sinful within Christianity. Whereas I don't think that that's a fair like a fair cultural base that many people are going to like relate to or even really be aware of.
Sure. And by the way, like a lot of these conversations kind of derail into like the nitty gritty of like one religion being better than the other, which I do, by the way, I do subscribe to that. But at the same time, I think that my general assertion is just that it's better to have some kind of like moral foundation, even if it doesn't involve like a deity or a higher power. It's just good to have moral conversations with young people who adopt like a moral system that's kind of coherent, and for that to be, relatively speaking, I don't want to say like universal, but like universally respected. So if you have like criticisms of like, you know, you should like thou shalt not lie. Like if you have criticisms where you're like, well, what if your wife asks if that dress makes you look fat? Do you lie to her? Like if you want to have those conversations, yeah, go ahead. But I think there should be a general presumption that telling the truth is better than lying, and that should be like a default position.
But that's also like, yeah, again, it's
you could say it's universal. It's not universal.
Well,
and, like,
it's not. But at the same time, that's largely because like a lot of Christian like moral standing is informed by Plato. Whereas the reason Islam is like a bit more picked is because it's based in Aristotelian thought. So I mean, you've got two very different philosophical bases of how you're building those.